Are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. Sorry about the feedback. Welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers on a hot mic.
Now that we got your attention?
Yes, my name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. I'm a little nervous about feedback.
We good? Okay, I think we got it good. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. We're all over South Florida radio now on FM radio, 95.3, 96.9, and 103.9. On AM, for those of you still listening to AM radio, on 740 and 1470. Of course, we're live streaming on Facebook if you are joining us there.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, and please feel free to hit the like and share buttons liberally, as well as the send an email message if you would like to join the conversation, or call in. The number at the studio here is 888-565-1470.
Got it.
And Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everybody out there.
Happy New Year to all our listeners. Our first show of 2020. And
I'm still not used to saying that.
Yeah.
I haven't really written it yet, but I'm not even used to saying it.
I've written it for a couple days in notes. It's odd, but go through this every year.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be nice to say it's a new year and maybe the start of a new decade, and just like that, we're sexually healthier and all of our sexual health problems
Oh,
are
well,
on the path to improvement.
that's the old fantasy, right?
Well, yeah, then you wake up with the New Year's Eve hangover and realize that things haven't changed all that much. Still, we're crawling along this endless quest for sexual health with nothing but obstacles put in the path every year. It seems like we're going
Yes.
backwards in
Well,
time.
the word morass came up for me when you're talking about that, and it does seem to be this kind of quagmire. We have to keep slogging through all of these issues just to get to a point where we can accept sex. We can be comfortable. We can normalize it.
How many times have we asked this question? What is more universal? What else can we say? Every human being on the planet shares in common, yet at the same time is the number one most uncomfortable subject for anybody to talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Well, it's that same irony we've also talked about in terms of there are few things that we can even think of, much less name, that bring more pleasure to people, yet it is for so many people their greatest source of pain.
And shame and embarrassment and guilt
Yeah.
and damaged relationships
Yeah.
and blame, right? I think we were talking about last week. And I'd like to continue that conversation. We ran out of time. We have an hour tonight, so we'll be able to stretch out a little bit more. But we're talking about porn and the fascinating end-of-year statistics that Pornhub does, kind of a snapshot into people's online viewing habits.
And I think the implications of that.
And the effects on relationships, or the projected effects on relationships. In other
Or
words, how many
expected.
times is porn blamed
Right.
for what is really a problematic relationship?
Well, it's become a knee-jerk response for so many people. If there's a problem, porn, he watches porn, that's the problem.
Unfortunately, even in my profession, too many therapists, as soon as they hear the word porn, go either, inside they go, uh-oh, and their first thought is, that's the problem in this relationship.
Well, and again, we've mentioned this before as well, that once porn even comes up, especially for therapists, in their minds, in the therapist's minds, they instantly create this victim-perpetrator dynamic.
You know what? It absolutely parallels the same. This is another huge flaw among, unfortunately, way too many couples counselors and marriage and family therapists. The perfect parallel with an affair. As soon as a couple walks into a therapist's office and get identified as cheater and cheated on, the therapist grabs that hook, that eats that worm, and consciously or otherwise, the therapy's already off the rails.
Sure.
Because the
sure.
therapist is aligning with the cheated on, and the therapy is nothing more than what does the cheater have to do to get out of the doghouse and make it right,
Right.
and save the marriage and
Right. Well, just that whole doghouse characterization is really what is the root. That's where the therapist generally place the issue, and then place the couple. Right? And let me take issue with something you just said. I don't think that parallels how most therapists look at and characterize affairs. I think it's exactly the same continuum, because I think when porn does become an issue, especially if one partner complains that their partner does to any degree watch porn, it instantly is setting up as a betrayal, as like an affair. It is set up almost like there was this kind of infidelity.
Yeah. And, well, that's come up in conversations before. I think we had a caller ask about that a while back. How do we deal with that values conflict? If someone's values have them believe that if we're in a relationship and your sexual focus, attention, thought, fantasy, dreams go in any direction except towards me, you're cheating.
Right.
That's a betrayal. So we can't even make eye contact with a waitress in a restaurant because I'll think you're thinking thoughts.
Right.
This kind
Right.
of dynamic happens.
Sure.
It's hard to do good sex therapy when there are personality disorders
Well,
involved.
yeah,
When
that's a
someone
big
is so
issue.
insanely jealous that everything is a betrayal.
Right.
So-
Right. And God forbid you mention that somebody may look attractive.
Right.
Like, oh, you want to sleep with them. Oh, now it opens this whole door of insecurity and projection and blame.
And that's often the first thing that comes up when the issue is porn.
Right.
The victim, in big air quotes,
Yes, for those of you who are listening on radio, he's making big air quotes.
believes that whatever, it's usually a heterosexual dynamic, and it's usually the guy and his wife or girlfriend who is hurt by this discovery that the guy is looking at. And even we have to talk about the word porn, because
Right.
that's loaded as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So just like cheater and cheated on, this becomes the new permanent. Right? I don't know how many couples I've worked with after an affair where I've had to, remind them. Even murderers are told how long they have to serve, and they serve their time and they're let out. Right? You got this person serving an indefinite sentence, or you'll decide when they've served enough time. It could be 6 months. It could be 6 years. It could be, 60.
Right.
You
But
have to be fair.
But it's not only even in terms of the term of that punishment, the sentence itself, if you commit some major felony, the sentence is clear. Jail time, parole, community service. What you have to do is very, very clear, yet in this situation, it's not only open-ended, nobody knows, but what do I have to do?
You should
I
know.
don't know.
You should know what to do.
Or I'll tell you when I figure it out or when it feels right.
Right.
I mean, this is the nonsense that
Yes.
ends up defining these relationships.
And
And I'm
this-
calling it nonsense, especially because this is really something that is perpetuated by the so-called professionals.
You're right. And these are the things that damage relationships.
Very much so. Very
Yes,
much so.
indeed.
And let me just throw in as well that for those of you listening or watching, especially if anybody has any issue or has any experience with this, give us a call. Join the conversation, 888-565-1470. And again, of course, through the submit button on Facebook.
Yes.
So going back to some of the data and
Wait,
some of the
I
stats.
just want to say we have a wonderful guest who's snuck into the studio. He's a little camera shy. I'm going to have a microphone over there in case she wants to join the conversation.
Oh, good. Good. So we won't have to let anybody see you, but they can hear you.
Yes, we're really glad to have you here.
Why don't you introduce her? No? Okay.
If-
We
if you
have
just-
some person
Some
here.
brilliant therapist from New Jersey. And we'll leave it at that until things change. So, yeah, as I said, this word porn has become so universal that people look at you strange if you use a phrase like sexually explicit media or erotica.
Or erotica. Oh, that confuses people.
Which, yeah, right. Everybody's, come on, you're talking about porn. But it's loaded because, well, first of all, most people have no idea where the word comes from and the history that it has. I mean, the literal translation, it's ridiculous that we use it to describe visual media for the most part because the word literally means writing about prostitutes.
Prostitution. Right.
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 So how that has come to be I guess, writing stories has turned into pictures and.
Well, I guess if you have to pay for
right.
it, although these days it's all free download, so it really shouldn't be called pornography anymore.
But there's also a legal connotation.
Sure,
That
sure.
pornography is a descriptor of a specific type of erotica that typically portrays exploitation.
Well, I think that's, we can talk about that. We can make that little nuanced distinction as a
Yeah,
professional, but I don't
that's
think,
not legal.
I mean,
It
go
has
back to
no
John
weight.
Ashcroft, who covered up the Lady Liberty in the courthouse because there was a marble breast on the statue that he
breast.
considered porn.
At the cost of $6,000 of taxpayer money.
I forgot what
Remember.
country it was from, but there were dignitaries from another country that were visiting, and we had a similar situation where all of the art in the State House was covered up because they didn't want to offend these people with their porn.
Well,
So, I mean, I think...
remember, was it in the late 80s, early 90s when that museum curator in Cincinnati or Cleveland was put in jail for showing a Mapplethorpe exhibit?
because, of course, Mapplethorpe is pornography.
Well, by whose definition?
Well, unfortunately,
Right.
by the Supreme Court's definition, that can be so arbitrarily used,
Right.
which is probably one of the most famous and ridiculous Supreme Court justice statements I think ever made in
I'll
terms
know
of,
it when I
right,
see
how
it.
do we judge pornography? I know it when I see it.
I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it.
Right, yeah, talk about an arbitrary standard.
Well, there's that difficult word to say, prurient. Right? There shouldn't be a word with the P-R-U-R in it. That's just, but prurient interest,
Yes.
right? In other words, lacking in any scientific or artistic
Or social value, they claim.
Right. And again, and who gets to?
Well, but it's not just the lacking in that social value or any redeeming quality, but it's also that idea. The prurient aspect is that it stimulates
Oh, heaven
some
forbid, we should-
erotic
we should-
feelings,
that's-
right?
That's why table legs had covers on them
Mm-hmm.
and bathtubs because it would stimulate sexual thoughts
Yeah.
in people.
Right.
If you're getting turned on by furniture, you have issues way beyond.
Well, we'll talk about that when we talk about fetishes
Yeah.
later on.
Thank you, Paula, for that comment on Facebook. Another Dr. Ruth with a question mark. I would say I only wish. She is a hero of ours. A lot of people don't know that before she married Mr. Westheimer, her maiden name was Ruth Siegel,
Right.
which was the name of our late mom. May she rest in peace. So we may have a photograph. We showed it on the air last
Yep.
year. It may be the only photo in the world with two Ruth Siegels in it. But we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I'm very upset and disappointed in our
Oh,
dear
yeah.
Dr. Ruth.
Yes.
I hope we can just attribute it to age and being so set in her ways, and I don't know if she deserves a pass, but in Time magazine,
No, I wouldn't give her a pass. I
she
think that was a
said
strike.
that was a big strike, and she defended it too in the same interview. She said, people are going to disagree with me, but I will respect their right to their opinion. But she said, once two people are naked in bed, there's no changing your mind. You've given consent.
Right.
And that's a horrible.
And that consent is
That's
immutable.
horribly, horribly wrong.
Right.
Sorry, Dr. Ruth. We love you forever. But
No, not sorry.
Bad-
We definitely
bad
take
call.
issue. Enthusiastic.
Consent is an
Dissent.
ongoing process during any kind of sexual encounter.
Right.
And anyone has the right to change their mind or change the course or direction at any time.
Anytime.
I used to tell guys, I don't care if a penis is a half an inch away from an opening. If someone says, I changed my mind, any centimeter further is crossed that line into an assault.
Sure.
Is into rape.
Well, don't even stop there. If that penis is inside an orifice and that person says, you know what, I don't want to do this, it ends.
Remove it. That's right. Nobody says, "Oh no, there's no stopping now. This is your fault. You got me going."
And you know what really bothers me about that, and this also underlies a lot of how people look at porn and a lot of these relationship dynamics. I think that really, and especially with Dr. Ruth, I think that speaks to this archaic view and idea that guys, once they become sexually aroused, they cannot control themselves. They cannot turn it off. They cannot stop. So a guy, once he gets an erection, is a sexual juggernaut, right? And it cannot be interfered with until he reaches his completion.
Right. I don't want to upset Ken, so I'll say cojones azules is a myth. There's no such thing that any harm can come to a guy once things get flowing, if there's an interruption. I used to say this in my undergrad class. Imagine, you get lucky with some married woman whose husband is out of town on business, and all of a sudden there's the car door in the driveway. How many guys think, "Oh, I can't stop now. Sorry, I don't want to get the blue ones." No, you're going to be running out the window and running down the street naked and not caring about erections or not, right?
No.
Interruption may be uncomfortable.
Sure.
Sexual tension, like any other tension, seeks to be released. And if it's interrupted before it's released, people are going to be uncomfortable. But guys, I've heard guys, and you have too, they swear, "Oh, it's painful. I'm doubled over. It's agony." I'll go to the bathroom and take care of yourself.
No, it's not. Any guy that doubts that or has any issue with that, try this at home. Give yourself the most robust, most throbbing erection you have ever had, and then think of your boss naked. Right?
Yeah.
Or your great-grandmother.
That
or
used to be...
the old lady that is walking down the street, and actually I want to sort of stop that because I don't want to be
really,
disrespectful to older people. But just think of someone you find truly unattractive, picture them naked, and you tell me how quick you can lose your erection.
How long has that been the classic guy-to-guy advice for preventing rapid ejaculation? You think
of baseball.
Or think about your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Right? Why introduce an unsexy thought? To me, it's like those numbing creams.
Well, it's exactly
Why
the
is
same
that
thing.
a
It's
good
brain numbing.
idea? I mean, and to a lot of guys, they would rather have a
Yes.
completely numb penis and remain, not ejaculate too quickly than risk being embarrassed.
And isn't there a great irony in that as well?
Wonderful sex. I didn't feel a thing, but at least I wasn't humiliated.
Well, but again, is it even going to be wonderful sex unless the guy's priapistic?
If
Is he
he's-
really going to maintain
but
an
if
erection
he's
with a
so-
completely numb penis?
Well,
I mean, that's one of
don't-
those
I guess the idea, what
trade-offs.
they sell, like that drug Promescent, their big claim to fame is that it absorbs quickly, so it doesn't rub off on the partner. So great, you're not both, you're both not numb.
Right.
But I guess their claim is that it's not completely numb, like dead wood, but reduced sensation, so a guy can last longer. But guys think that happens because of horniness or excitement or hyperstimulation.
Right.
No, it happens because of anxiety.
Yeah.
It happens
Yeah.
because they're worried, and the point of no, the what am I saying? The point of no return sneaks up on them, and that can be fixed.
Right.
Not treated
Absolutely.
with drugs. Urologists
No,
are putting
no.
guys on SSRIs now for that.
Right.
Because quote normal guys complain that when they're on these antidepressants, it takes a really, really long time to ejaculate.
Right. Now,
so urologists go, oh, regular guys say it takes too long. We'll take rapid guys, and it'll put them right in that regular
So
range.
by delaying that response, by even inhibiting that response for a rapid ejaculator, sure, that seems like an answer.
It is, medically.
But
What urologists don't think
Yeah.
about is up here. What's
Right.
going on in the brain?
Right.
A guy walks out of his office with a script thinking, great, like there's a neon arrow flashing over his head. I'm a rapid ejaculator.
Well, yeah, that kind of
And to
creates the
prove it,
identity.
Now, for the rest of my life, if I want to have sex and not be embarrassed, I have to take a pill first. Instead
Right.
of like what, 3 weeks with a sex therapist?
Well, but
Done.
but
cured,
even and again, the
never
combination,
again.
right? Where I'm okay with using
In
something like
severe
SSRIs
cases, yes.
is always and only in conjunction with sex therapy, and then in
Always.
that case, I would look at them like training wheels.
Exactly.
Right? That, when people are first learning how to ride a bicycle, using the training wheels to keep you up, to provide support, to help you from falling down while you're developing the skill. But as the skill increases, the medication needs to decrease, which, by the way, I think is a formula for the vast majority of medications that people take, with very few exceptions like diabetes, insulin, some thyroid medications. With very few exceptions, medications should always be this training wheels thing. They should always be tools rather than solutions.
What do they say at the end of every Ambien commercial?
I don't know. I fall asleep halfway through.
It says sleep medication should not be taken for longer than
14 days.
days unless on the advice of your doctor. How many people we know have been on Ambien for 25 years?
Oh, years.
And then, it's non-addictive. Yeah, get to sleep without it. Let me see.
Well,
once.
but see, now there's a nice little thing, too. And I know we're kind of away from the porn, but that sense of it's not addictive, it doesn't mean it's not dependency producing.
Good segue back. Yes. Right? Because let's talk about what porn is blamed for, or what is attributed to porn.
Yes.
I guess what gets the most press, and we've talked about it on the show before, but it's just ludicrous, this idea. And, if something gets an acronym, it must be real.
Well, that's right. It must be real if it has an acronym.
PIED, dreadful, porn-induced erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
That guys believe they watch so much porn that they can't even get an erection without it.
I mean, that's what that whole no-fap movement is really all about.
Yeah.
That these guys, especially in their 20s and 30s, that now have, especially the occasions where they do find themselves with a partner, now find themselves with erectile difficulty. And of course, rather than maybe there's something about me, maybe there's something that I'm doing, maybe something I need to do differently. No, the instant knee-jerk response is, just like the old roll gold press, must be the porn. Right? That's the answer. Well, I can't do it. It must be the porn.
Well, I get how it's right there. It's a kind of a go-to explanation because no guy's going to think, the worst possible thought. My junk don't work anymore.
But that's not even the case, because their junk is working fine.
That's right. They don't have the thought, gee, this never happens when I'm by myself.
That's right. Doesn't happen when I'm by myself.
I
It
don't
doesn't.
have
It doesn't
ED
happen when I'm
alone.
sleeping.
Right. Yeah.
All of those sort of normal barometers of a properly functioning penis are all there.
So
It's
nobody-
only when they are with a partner.
Nobody self-diagnoses partner-induced erectile dysfunction,
Right.
when in fact that's
Right.
probably what it is.
But I
There's
would.
anxiety. There is an anxiety when one is alone.
Yes.
Completely lost, absorbed in a fantasy world
Mm-hmm.
of high arousal and zero performance pressure.
Which is basically what that sort of masturbation is about. And we can skip around that one as well. When
Absolutely.
people talk
That's
about
real
this,
important.
this incredibly ridiculous phrase, which always makes me laugh when people hear, and it brings out the brat in me, because I always have to say something
Yeah, that's
sarcastic
hard
when I
to
hear
do.
people. But this looking at porn. Yes, that's what they're doing. It's
Sure.
a gaze, it's an observation. That's all they're
Just
doing, looking at
That's
it.
the only activity that's going on.
Right. I mean, again, let's be
Both-
honest.
both
People
hands on the
use porn to
keyboard.
masturbate.
The whole issue, it's said
Right.
often.
And this
on
is an
this
issue of
show,
masturbation,
but
not of
that's
porn.
why, because we're still too immature to talk about masturbation. It's easier to blame the porn. And yeah, porn for the most part. Yes, a lot of couples enjoy porn as part of their sex life, but the vast majority of porn use is solo enjoyment to stimulate fantasies for sexual arousal.
Right. For men and
How
women.
many times have we had, we get these panicked college students, these guys who think that they're porn addicts because, or sex addicts because they masturbate daily. And we ask them, if you were having sex with someone every day, would you be here complaining in a panic, telling me you have a problem? And without fail, every guy says, no, I wish I was having sex every day. And I say, you are.
You are.
Right? Like your penis knows if anybody else is in the room? Right?
No. But the head certainly does.
Right. And that's where all sexual dysfunction begins, right? Because the most important sex organ of the body, everybody, just a reminder, is not between the legs, it's between our ears. That's where sex lives, that's where desire comes from. And it's, you know, people talk about mind body like they're a separate thing. Our body is just this vehicle carrying around. First of all, there's no such thing as a mind, right?
Exactly.
It's just a concept to try and explain some of the gazillions of things our brain is doing.
Well, I mean,
Thoughts,
again,
feelings, emotions.
because we don't know where
right?
that transition. How do you get proteins moving and molecules interacting to,
And
you know,
cells
thinking of
shooting
your
chemicals at
grandmother's apple
other-
pie,
Right.
right?
even-
Or a sexy erotic thought.
Yeah, and what makes something, right? How many times have we just drawn two circles on the board with dots, right? That's just two circles with dots, and like every guy in the room goes, boobies.
Yeah.
Right? That's because our brain is wired that
Right.
way. To
Right.
see from sounds, you know, that's part of it too. A lot of times instead of, you know, when guys come presenting with what they call out of control problems or inability to disconnect from porn. Sometimes I just have them do, just like you'd desensitize a phobia. Just step by step by step. Do your thing with the porn, right? Get yourself going. Then see if you can turn your computer around and just go by the sound and finish. Then the next time, get yourself going. Then close the computer halfway and log on to sexy thoughts and sexy images here like you used to, or for older guys before we had these things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then maybe you can get yourself started and immediately close the computer. And then the next step is you've disconnected. Now you're back to masturbating without the porn. The same way how our friend and colleague and guest on the show, Doug Braun Harvey, just sidesteps this whole endless debate about sex addiction or not by just talking about like an example of chemical drug use and sex. How do we disconnect the sex and drug linked behavior, right? So how can guys disconnect the porn and masturbation instead of assuming they're one and the same,
Right.
that they have to abstain and, you know, tie their hands to the bedposts like they used to do to boys when they went to sleep at night to keep them from touching themselves.
Right. And, you know, and again, and this sort of ascribing this nefarious, you know, external force that takes them over. And these guys that watch so much porn are victims of their porn because they're victims of their brain. Isn't that another interesting irony? The more we've seemed to be learning about the brain, the more it's becoming our biggest enemy.
Yeah.
It's not an understanding of it. We're becoming afraid of it. It's like, oh, well, this is, well, that's why it's taking over. Which is, again, it's all nonsense. These people know nothing about the brain and what it's doing.
Yeah.
Keep your brain scans. They don't tell us anything. They're
You
out
know,
of context.
I quoted you on this because it's one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard. All of this attempt at applying neuroscience concepts to try and explain the brain. It's like looking in one window on the ground floor of a skyscraper and trying to assume what's going on in the entire
building.
Right?
Yep.
By peeking into one window.
Right.
And
In one moment.
You point out, almost all of that research is done in bugs or ferrets or
Rats,
moles
animals,
or-
and
right?
yeah.
We barely
And
scratched
fruit
the
flies.
surface. So we're about halfway through. We're going to take a short break. Thanks for joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
At Carmen. Let's all welcome a new sponsor to the show. It's AMP2 TV. the first and only internet production company that's truly plugged in. When you're looking for a full-service internet TV radio production company, discover AMP2 TV, a full-service production company that can provide all streaming videos in studio or remotely. They offer web page development, and they use all the latest platforms to help make all your business selling points more powerful. They can do remotes or live radio streaming as well as tape productions for social media platforms and television. AMP2 TV can handle all of your television needs, including closed caption for a perfect on-air telecast. Choose from a variety of creative TV and radio packages or visit one of their many studios to get your creative juices flowing. Come and see why AMP2 TV works with many major companies, including Comcast, Bravo, and Fox 29, as well as individuals and businesses of all types and sizes. To see samples of their work or to find out more, visit their website at amp2.tv. That's A-M-P, the number 2.tv, or call them at 866-224-5422. Feel free to call for a quote or just a consult of how to put your business on a social media platform or radio platform, or just doing a show that is covered by all platforms. Call 866-224-5422 and make an appointment. That's 866-224-5422. You're listening to Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, a certified sex therapist and sexuality educator. So, welcome back to Sex Talk.
And we are back. Thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining us, welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. We're talking about porn and relationships and relationship problems that are often blamed on porn.
People's relationships with their porn.
That's right. Yeah.
That's I think, an under-considered dynamic.
Indeed.
You know, I've often used that framing for a lot of different things. You know, when I talk with people with dealing with chronic pain, for example, you know, that's part of the framing that I use and look at, you know, kind of their relationship with their pain. You know, people have these relationships with all these different things. And yeah, people have a relationship with their porn.
But because, as we were just saying before the break, because of people's relationship with masturbation, which is typically wrapped in
another relationship.
Embarrassment and shame and
Sure.
something that no one is supposed to admit to, and perpetuate the myth that masturbation's only for lonely losers who can't find a partner, right? Then that becomes part of a private world. Again, a lot of source of shame for a lot of
Yep.
people. And even a lot of therapists might not realize, maybe I'm going to be horribly sexist for a second and say maybe this is just a boy brain, girl brain thing. But a lot of women therapists are quick to suggest to a couple, why don't you share with each other the kind of porn you like, and don't realize what they're asking of guys. Most guys ain't never going there. That's a private world. They're not bringing anyone.
Yeah.
Right? Or remember, I was thinking that classic Larry Miller line, right? If women knew what men were thinking, they would never stop slapping
us.
Right?
No.
There's just something about maybe it's, I can't speak to women and their fantasy world, but for guys' fantasy worlds, it's kind of like a private place they go to. I'm sure it's not too different.
But I think that's true for just about everybody. That really is the purpose of fantasy, to have that private, safe place to explore and consider and to pretty much go anywhere you want. But it's uniquely, distinctly, and emphatically our own.
And that's, I think, really we're onto something. This is why it's so threatening, right?
Because
How
it
many
automatically
times-
excludes the
How many
partner.
times have we challenged therapists, even huge names in the field, folks who train thousands of therapists, challenge them on the idea of making any distinction at all between secrecy and privacy. And if there's if there's a better example of a private issue, masturbation is it.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Now, if someone is in a relationship, do they relinquish their right to privacy?
No.
But that has to be negotiated.
Right.
Right.
Ah,
How many times?
wow.
How many times in therapy do we see couples where you know, you ask, does your partner masturbate? I don't know. Well, shouldn't you? Or even is your partner orgasmic? I don't know. Mostly hear that from guys about women, right?
You know, there's
Usually
rarely-
You don't hear that in same-sex couples.
You know, I think the only rational answer to a question about masturbation is generally yes, or for some, no. But all of these other things, they're really not rational. Whether it's, knowing whether or not your partner masturbates, how many times, like you mentioned before, especially for heterosexual guys, the two responses that we get the most, do you masturbate? No, I get sex regularly.
Right.
Like it is the one or the other. But the one that boggles my mind are these homophobic
The guys that won't even touch their own penis because
Yeah,
that's gay.
this really is mind-boggling for me. So, do you masturbate? I'm not gay.
Right.
Are you that
is-
homophobic that the thought of touching even
Yeah.
your own penis
That's a mind blower.
is disturbing?
Yeah, I can only imagine what a mess their toilets are.
Yeah.
Because they can't aim, obviously, and have to urinate.
Obviously,
like,
that's right, can't
with
touch
their
it.
hands up here. Mm-hmm. So silly.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I think those are really the crux of the issue when we're talking about porn, particularly in the context of a relationship. And I think you're right that there really is something it's a masturbation issue and it's a privacy issue.
Right.
And I think going back to how a lot of therapists frame this, I think there's that automatic bias against anything an individual does as part of a relationship that excludes or at least doesn't include their partner.
Yeah, but the killer is only because it's sex, because there's thousands of things that couples do every day that do exactly that. How many couples are sitting in the same room for hours, both on their own tablets or laptops?
Well, but they'll say they're doing it together.
Oh, yeah, they're on Facebook together. We know people that are communicating on Facebook from different rooms in the house.
Yeah, that's how they talk to each other.
Right. And how much time do people spend on Facebook? Right? Here's a shot.
Well,
Guess, our dear guest. Guess the average length of time spent on a visit to Pornhub.
I don't remember. You gave me the statistic at some point. A lot of hours.
No.
A lot.
no.
10 minutes and
Oh,
36
that's
seconds.
Right.
Yes.
10
Right.
minutes and 36 seconds is the average visit duration in the United States, which is actually down 1 full second
Yes.
from the previous
Yes.
year.
But we're still a second and a half, I believe, above the world average.
This is
Yes.
the new statistic.
Yes, this is the 2019,
The-
right?
The world average
Right.
is 10 minutes,
Right.
28 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, we're a couple seconds longer.
Now compare that to other, even just internet type of activity. I have lost
Who sits on
literally
Facebook for 10 minutes?
hours,
Right.
not only on Facebook, but even just emails. Going
Yeah.
through emails and check, oh, okay, well, this one takes me over here. I look at this one, and this one takes me over here. The internet itself is inherently a
It's
time
an
suck.
ADD machine. It's the only it's voluntary distraction.
Yeah.
People go and say, please distract me. Take me
Mm-hmm.
away from my work. Ooh, here's a pop-up. Ooh, I want to know about this celebrity.
Exactly. Or you check this, you follow this link, you follow that link.
It's insane.
All this clickbait stuff
But
that
there's
people
no-
take. You go this one.
There's no FBA 12-step fellowships.
No.
There's no.
But see, here's
no
the great
football
irony.
Anonymous.
That's right. And here's the
meetings.
great irony. People probably spend less time online with porn than virtually any other online activity.
10 minutes, 36 seconds is the average visit.
Yeah.
There is no other activity that's done. And, something else we were talking about earlier today. Why are people so hypersensitive to distraction during sex? When no
Well,
other
you know the answer to
activity
that.
really. I love this. This is a classic from Marty Klein. Imagine if someone was having a meal. Beautiful meal, wonderful food. They spend hours cooking and candle, not in the kitchen, in the dining room. Bring out the special china, right? Really nice meal. But somebody stops for a second and says, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go in the kitchen and grab the salt and pepper. And they get up and half a second, they're back at the table and there's their partner. You've ruined this meal.
I'm not hungry anymore.
They shove their plate away. You had to go get the salt and pepper. Now I'm not hungry anymore. No, that would be a crazy person.
Yeah.
But during sex, sometimes it's the shift in position or a change in sensation. There's that hypersensitive, you've ruined this.
Well, because I
Or,
think people.
now I'm not in the mood.
So many people are on such shaky ground sexually. They're almost. It's almost
Is
like
it
walking
because
on this
we're in here
tightrope.
all the time?
Not only that we're in there all the time, but it's where are we in there? And how many people, it's their ego on the line, their sense of self. They're not only the self-judgment, but the projection of being judged by a partner.
Yeah.
So all of this
Especially guys.
self-consciousness, when we're eating, we're not that self-conscious. Some people probably should be because you make a mess. But but when it comes to sex, most people seem to be self-conscious. That's
Yeah,
that
to a
spectatoring,
fault. Exactly.
right? They step out of themselves,
Yeah.
and they sort of stand aside, watching themselves, criticizing, judging, worrying. All of that kind of stuff. You don't really see that in any other sort of human behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So it really, there's when most people get into a sexual situation, there's almost always this sense of something at stake. Right? And I think
Well,
that's really what
How
drives
many
a lot
guys,
of that.
especially of older generations, much older than us, like Freddie's age, how many guys grew up with, referring to their penis as their manhood?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
talk about
Freddie still
everything,
does.
everything on the line. That see, another sexist cliche, I think, or stereotype. I don't know which, but if women tend to think of men as being horny all the time, what they don't see is right next to the "ooh, goody, we get to have sex" is the we're on.
Right.
Now
Right.
my manhood is on the line. I better be good enough, last long enough, be big enough, and not too quick and not too long. And that's work.
Yeah.
That's anxiety.
Well, and again, I love the book. We have a colleague, Ian Kerner, who just wonderful stuff, and his book.
She finishes first.
She
Paraphrasing.
Right. I know. She moves around the mountain. I'll say she finishes first. Now, on the one hand, I think there's really good stuff in there, but there's a whole nother part of that for a lot of guys where that's sort of a manipulation. That's a defensive behavior.
It's compensatory.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
As a way of making up for the fact that they know once the main event happens, it's going to be over quick.
Right. If I can get her to do that, then, I'm off the hook.
Yeah.
Pressure's off.
But that, I've been talking a lot, it just seems to have been a theme the last couple of weeks with a lot of couples in therapy about these rules. And, like Bill Maher's regular bit, new rules.
Yeah.
First of all, nobody can identify where these rules come from. They
No.
have to abide by them, but they have no idea where they came from. And the thought that you can throw it away and write your own rules is like, it's amazing how often people are like, really? We can do that?
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
why?
But that's also scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess.
The fact that you can create this relationship, you set the terms, you set the limits, you decide every detail between you what it's going to be, that means that both the success and failure are on you. You can't blame
Well,
anybody else.
It also forces people to talk. And
Ooh.
how often do we point out that universal upside downness, that reality that it's easier for most people to have sex, especially in
Right,
the dark,
in the dark.
with a little buzz on,
Yeah.
than to talk about having sex.
Sure.
That's too intimate and scary.
Right. Well, again, we've talked about this in the past before, and you've mentioned this earlier. This idea of what needs to be negotiated ahead of time. People don't go into their relationships negotiating. They don't go in communicating. We go into our relationships with assumptions and expectations, not agreements, no understanding. Right? No, let's look at this, let's create this, let's try this, see what happens. None of that seems to be there for the majority of people.
Including conversations about masturbation and erotica.
Right.
Right. That's why wasn't it last week, 2 weeks ago? We were talking about this. How do people learn what the rules are in a relationship when they break them?
When they break them, right?
That's
Exactly.
that's no way to have a healthy relationship.
No.
And nobody would go into business that way. Hey,
Right.
This contract is blank. Oh, don't worry. We'll fill it in as we go
Right.
along. Just sign it. You must be
Right.
crazy.
And, by the way, you didn't know you were taking a test, but you failed.
That's right.
I mean, that really is, I think, again, what that foundation of a lot of our problems are. Remember, we have this puritanical legacy that we still live. We still have this way in this country of looking at any type of sexual behavior or sexual act, even talking about it as a sexual act. Again, sex is something we do,
Perform.
not something we are. right? We don't look at it as this part of our humanity. Right? The core, the central aspect. I mean, sex is that sense of our maleness, femaleness, not just with gender, but it's all connected. Right? And for especially a lot of millennials out there, no, I'm sorry, gender is not completely socially determined, and you don't get to choose whatever you want. There is a very biological aspect to gender as well as sex. Right? So as we're growing and we do see more diversity, yes, but there's also a lot of play acting out there. And, you know, it's hard to know where to draw that line, so I'm not even going to go anywhere near that. I'm just putting that out there. You know, that there is a very, very definite biological aspect to gender.
Sure.
And
I mean,
it just can't be denied.
Right? Our brains are different. Really, I mean, as much as this is also kind of a regular theme for us, as much as I hated that John Gray stuff from, 25, 30 years ago, that men are from Mars and women are from
The
Venus.
title is the only thing legitimate.
No, I don't even like the title because it implies we're different species from different planets that'll never understand each other, right? We are far more alike than different.
Sure.
All of our organ systems and parts and right, with except between the legs and between the ears.
Right.
And those are significant
Right.
differences.
And we do perceive things differently.
And
We do
chemically,
process differently. Yeah, I mean, when did it become? I remember at some point growing up, and I didn't get this email. I never got the memo. Nobody invited me to a meeting. But somewhere along the line, we went from celebrating our differences to it now almost being a crime to have differences. There's like this almost this hyper homogenization of everything, right? In spite of the fact that there is also this terminal uniqueness going on. Right? It's sort of like what MTV started when they first came out in like 1981. Their message is gone so far out there. Remember what their basic message was? Be unique, be yourself, but just like everybody else. Right? So there's a rule to your distinctiveness.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to be sort of, be a unique conformist.
Yeah, like the goths and the vamps on South Park. Oh, we're goths.
Right. So again, we whatever the notions we have, and for so many people, and again, where these ideas come from, where these rules come from, we don't really know. But when people have them, they hold on to them really tightly.
Well, we do know where a lot of them come from. A lot of them come from culture and religion, and a lot of that script, some of it was actually, we always talk about the unwritten script. A lot of it has been written.
Well, sure,
and
sure.
a few of what has been written is very helpful because it's all prohibitive and sinful and what'll get you burning in hell.
But also based on incorrect information.
Of course.
All right?
How many people think the story of Onan in the Old Testament is about masturbation? Right?
Uh-huh.
Well, first of all, there were no such thing as microscopes or genetics or understanding what sperm and eggs even are.
Right.
Right? Like technically not even human cells. And people don't know that the story of Onan was punished for masturbating. He was punished for pulling out.
Yes.
Coitus interruptus for not impregnating his dead brother's wife.
Right.
Which was his legal obligation since his brother died before bearing a child.
Right. And
now, they never get into detail why Onan was okay having sex with his sister-in-law.
No, that was a commandment by God.
But the pulling out part.
Right. No, but see, that's why it was, remember, sin.
Right.
It was St. Augustine. It was really the Catholic Church that changed the definition of sin into some kind of moral act, a good or bad judgment. Sin, particularly in Old Testament times, meant selfish, particularly selfish at the expense of somebody else.
Yes.
So that story,
travelers.
And because in ancient Jewish tradition, if a man dies, his brother has the obligation to take care of his family. If he didn't impregnate her, he has to father the child with her. God commanded Onan to father a child with his brother's wife. His brother died before he got her pregnant. That was the sin. So in spite of what God told him to do, he pulled out. Right? So
but
the ultimate
selfishness.
Well, I'm sorry, not ultimate. Adam and Eve were the ultimate selfishness.
Yes. the idea of spilling the seed is kind of like causing
Right.
millions of abortions.
Right. Well,
Killing
and that's the
millions of
thing.
little babies.
Right. And again,
but where they're supposed to go? Not on the ground, on the womb,
in the womb.
on the soil, on
Right.
the plot.
And again, and
to
here's where, or
fertilize.
another reason why we really can't be relying on these things for any kind of modern day information.
Right,
Because,
of
well,
course.
first of all, if people really did read their Bibles, right, then in Leviticus, they would see the explanation and they wouldn't have to go there because it's in there. It was the old homunculus theory.
Right.
Because again, thousands of years ago, the belief was based on what they observed. Like I said, no microscopes, they didn't know what this was. What they observed was during intercourse, a man shoots this stuff out of his penis, goes into a woman's body, and then this thing happens. So the thinking was, we carried, that's the homunculus
Baby
theory.
seeds.
Man carries
Yeah.
the seed and
The
the child.
baby
And it even
seeds.
says that in Leviticus, that like the acorn,
Right.
like the seed of the tree, it contains the whole tree.
Right.
So basically, women's bodies are just incubators.
I wonder how they explained it when the kid came out looking like mom.
Or how about just another genetic diversity?
Right, yeah.
Right?
I don't-
And again, that's also where we got chimerism from.
yeah.
That if there was no such thing as a birth defect or a genetic abnormality, no,
You'd
it
have
was a
to-
monster.
You have to introduce a whole other show with just a few minutes to go.
Right? But again, the point is, these things have no real basis in fact, in logic, in the way things are, but this is still the basis for so many people in how they are defining and judging their sexual acts and sexual behaviors.
Yeah.
And sexual self.
Sadly, this is the same way that sex becomes politicized.
Mm-hmm.
And people actually have the audacity to try and legislate kinds of sex or kinds of people.
Well, but they're also, what is the basis of their desire to do so? It is their Bible. They're doing it primarily on religious grounds. Right? Because when you
I
look at people
suppose.
that are not coming from that place, we talk about diversity. We talk about choice. We talk about, being able to live according to, our sense of morality, our own sense of right or wrong, and there are sort of, there's a lot of room to work in. Right? Not this. There's no room to work in this. These people are using these, what they consider biblical mandates, and trying to govern behavior of people today. And I'm sorry, it
Careful,
doesn't work.
Barrio. All of our red state listeners are turning away. No, but it's important. It's we're due to have we need to have some clergy in here and remind people that sexuality is spiritual, and we need to
Yeah.
reconnect all these disconnections that have happened over the centuries.
And
of
again, isn't it-
fearing sex and dirtying sex.
And if you go back-
shaming.
Right? If you go back before that sort of Judeo-Christian era, sex was the way to get closer to God. Sex was sort of the spiritual path.
Right.
Right? That ecstasy, that transcendent experience. What, again, never got the memo. How did we go
Where-
from that to dirty and shameful and
Right.
bad? Which, by the way, I'm sorry, you cannot hold these two thoughts in the same head and be considered anywhere near rational. If you, on the one hand, think we are created in the image of a divine, perfect being, you cannot think that there's any part of this thing that is bad, dirty, or shameful.
Right.
Can't have them both.
Right.
Pick
Right,
one.
Right.
Right? Pick one. You can't have them both.
Yeah.
Right?
Remember
So,
that clergy workshop when the priest stormed out of the room?
oh,
Because we're talking about the clitoris and its function and its complete lack of any urinary or reproductive function
Right.
at all.
Right.
Only pleasure.
right. But that
And
was my game, set,
He got
match.
offended, and one of us said, "Don't get upset with us. Take it up with the manufacturer."
Take it up with the manufacturer. Yep.
Oh, he stormed out of the room.
Yep. So, but that's still a very important question, you know, especially for people that only think sex is for reproduction. Then why is there a clitoris?
Does anybody think that anymore? The most
Yes.
conservative,
Yes, they do.
orthodox religious people in the world, does anybody still think that sex is only for making babies?
Well, no, or it depends on in some orthodoxies.
Yeah, but there's even still, right? Some, even Orthodox Jews value sexuality.
Well, yeah.
The pleasure between a marriage, right?
Absolutely.
You know what the music means. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks for those of you who joined the conversation. And please join us next Friday at 7 for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Have a great week, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everyone.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
The opinions expressed on the